I'm standing in line at a coffee shop on a Tuesday morning, and the woman in front of me is losing her mind. Not visibly, not dramatically, but I can see it happening. The way her shoulders climb toward her ears when the barista says her drink will take 3 minutes. The way her jaw tightens when someone behind us coughs. The way her fingers drum against her phone case in that specific rhythm that says this moment is torture and I need it to be over. She's not having a bad day. She's having the same day most of us have, a day where every small thing demands a response, where every inconvenience requires internal commentary, where the gap between what happens and what we feel about it has disappeared completely. I know this because I used to be her. I used to react to everything. The slow driver, the typo in the email, the tone in my partner's voice, the weather, the news, the silence, the noise. Everything was a signal that demanded my emotional response, and I gave it freely, generously, exhaustively, until one day I realized I wasn't actually experiencing my life. I was just reacting to it. There's a profound difference between seeing and reacting, between awareness and compulsion, between being alive and being triggered. Most of us have learned to see everything. We're hyperaware, hypervigilant, constantly scanning for threats and problems and things that need fixing. But we've never learned the second part, how to see without the automatic reaction that hijacks our nervous system and turns us into puppets of our circumstances. Here's what I want you to understand. The ability to see everything and react to nothing isn't detachment. It isn't numbness. It isn't spiritual bypassing or toxic positivity. It's freedom. It's the difference between being controlled by your life and being present in it. Between being a pinball bouncing off every bumper and being someone who moves through the world with intention. In the next 110 minutes, I'm going to show you how I learned to do this, not through meditation retreats or years of therapy, but through a series of specific realizations that changed how I relate to everything I experience. This isn't theory. This is how you reclaim your nervous system from a world designed to keep it activated. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The day I watched myself react. I'm sitting at my desk, staring at an email, and I can feel my heart rate climbing. The email isn't even rude. It's just a question from a colleague. Do you have time to hop on a call about the project? But somehow, my body has interpreted this as a threat. My chest feels tight. My jaw is clenched. There's a heat rising up the back of my neck. And then something strange happens. I watch myself get angry. Not like I'm choosing it. Not like I'm thinking about it. I watch my face flush. I watch my fingers curl into fists. I watch my mind start generating responses, defensive ones, sharp ones, ones designed to make this person understand that I'm busy, that I don't have time for unnecessary calls, that this request is an imposition. All of this happens in about 4 seconds. And in those 4 seconds, I'm not in control. I'm not making decisions. I'm just reacting. Like a machine that's been programmed to respond a certain way to certain inputs. Here's what nobody tells you about reactions. They're not really yours. You think you're choosing to get frustrated at the traffic, but you're not. You think you're deciding to feel anxious about that text message, but you're not. What you're experiencing is an automatic process, a neural pathway that's been carved so deep through repetition that it fires without your conscious involvement. Let me tell you the exact moment I understood this. I'm in a meeting, and my boss makes a comment about a report I submitted. It's not even criticism. It's a neutral observation, something like I noticed you took a different approach this time. But the moment those words hit my ears, something activates. My face goes hot. My stomach clenches. My mind immediately starts building a defense. He thinks I did it wrong. He's questioning my judgment. I need to explain why I made that choice. I need to prove I'm competent. But here's what's different this time. I'm aware of it happening. I'm watching this cascade of reactions, like I'm sitting in the audience of my own life. And what I notice is this. There's a gap, a tiny space between the comment and my reaction. It's maybe half a second, but it's there. In that half second, the comment is just information. It's neutral. It's just sound waves carrying meaning. And then my brain interprets those sound waves. It assigns them meaning. It decides they're a threat to my competence, my status, my value. And once that interpretation happens, my body responds, flooding with stress hormones, preparing for defense, activating survival mechanisms that were designed for actual danger. But there was no danger. There was just a comment. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is the moment I realized most of what I call my experience isn't actually experience. It's reaction to experience. It's the story my nervous system tells about what's happening, not what's actually happening. This realization changes everything once you see it clearly, because if your reactions aren't really yours, if they're just automatic programs running in the background, then you're not actually living your life. You're living your conditioning. You're experiencing your past patterns, not your present moment. I had a client named Marcus who came to me because he couldn't control his temper, his words. But when we started unpacking what that meant, what we discovered was simpler and more profound. He wasn't choosing anger. Anger was choosing him. Every time his teenage daughter rolled her eyes, his system would activate. Every time a driver cut him off, his system would activate. Every time his wife used a certain tone, his system would activate. He'd go from 0 to rage in seconds. And afterward, he'd feel terrible, guilty, ashamed, confused about why he couldn't just control himself. Why? But control wasn't the issue. Awareness was. Once Marcus started watching his reactions, instead of being his reactions, everything shifted. Not because he forced himself to calm down. Not because he tried harder to be a good person. But because he started noticing the gap, that half second between stimulus and response where he actually had a choice. The eye roll was just a facial expression. The cutoff was just a car changing lanes. The tone was just a pattern of sounds. They became threats only when his nervous system interpreted them as threats. And once you see that interpretation happening, you can question it. Think about your last 3 reactions to something small. Maybe it was a text you misread. Maybe it was someone's tone in a Zoom call. Maybe it was the way your partner loaded the dishwasher wrong. Notice how fast you went from stimulus to story, from data to drama. The driver didn't cut you off to ruin your day. They just changed lanes. Your boss's feedback wasn't an attack on your competence. It was an observation. Your partner's silence wasn't cold. It was just quiet. Every reaction you have carries decades of accumulated programming. Ancient fears. Old wounds. Patterns inherited from people who inherited them from people before them. You're not reacting to now. You're reacting to then. The first step to freedom isn't stopping your reactions. It's seeing them, watching them happen, catching yourself in the act of turning neutral data into emotional crisis. Because once you can see the gap, you can widen it. And in that widening, everything changes. Chapter 2. The Exhaustion of Constant Response. I'm lying in bed at the end of a day where nothing particularly bad happened, and I'm absolutely drained. Not tired drained. Not physically exhausted drained. This is something deeper, a bone-level depletion that feels like I've been running on a treadmill for 16 hours straight. But I haven't been running. I've been sitting at a desk, in meetings, on my couch. What I've actually been doing is reacting all day to everything, to the email tone that seemed passive-aggressive, to the Slack message that pinged at the wrong time, to the meeting that ran long, to my kid's mess in the kitchen, to the news headline I glimpsed while scrolling, to the sound of my neighbor's dog, to the way my shirt felt too tight around my shoulders. Each reaction was tiny. Each one took maybe 5 seconds. But when you add up hundreds of these micro-reactions across a day, they accumulate into something that feels like survival mode. Because that's exactly what it is. Your nervous system wasn't designed for the life you're living. Let me be specific about what I mean. Your stress response, the system that floods you with cortisol and adrenaline, that makes your heart race and your palms sweat, evolved to handle acute, immediate threats. A predator, a physical attack, a moment of genuine danger that requires instant action. Once the threat passes, the system is designed to reset. Your body returns to baseline. You rest. You recover. But that's not how you're using it anymore. I'm in a coaching session with a woman named Elena, and she's describing her morning routine. She wakes up and immediately checks her phone. 17 unread messages. 3 require immediate responses. 1 is from her boss, marked urgent. Before she's even out of bed, her cortisol is spiking. She gets her kids ready for school. 1 won't put on shoes. The other spills juice on their uniform. More cortisol. She's in the car, stuck in traffic, watching the clock, calculating whether she'll be late. More cortisol. She gets to work, opens her email, sees 43 new messages. Her chest tightens. By 9 a.m., she's experienced the same physiological activation her ancestors experienced maybe once a month in genuine life or death situations. And her day is just beginning. I don't understand why I'm so tired all the time, she says. I'm not doing anything that hard. But she is. She's doing the hardest thing a human body can do, activating survival mode continuously without resolution. She's treating every inconvenience like a threat, every notification like an emergency, every small frustration like a crisis that requires her full physiological response. Her body can't tell the difference between tiger chasing you and email marked urgent. Both trigger the same cascade of stress hormones. Both demand the same energy. Both leave the same depletion in their wake. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is how most of us live now. We've turned our nervous systems into responders, not processors. We're not experiencing our lives. We're defending against them. The cost of constant reaction isn't just exhaustion. It's the loss of your actual experience. When you're in reactive mode, you're not present. You're not noticing the quality of morning light, or the taste of your coffee, or the feeling of your child's hand in yours. You're scanning for threats, processing stimuli, generating responses. You become a biological algorithm. Stimulus in, reaction out. Stimulus in, reaction out. I see this most clearly when I work with high achievers. They come to me burnt out, confused about why success doesn't feel like they thought it would. And when we dig in, what we find is this: they've optimized themselves into machines. They've learned to respond efficiently to everything. Emails, requests, problems, opportunities, but they've lost the ability to simply be present without responding. One client told me he couldn't remember the last time he just sat somewhere without his mind immediately jumping to his to-do list. He'd be at his daughter's soccer game, and his brain would be drafting emails. He'd be on vacation, and he'd be problem-solving work issues. His nervous system had been trained so thoroughly to respond that it couldn't stop responding. Even rest became another task, requiring response. The devastating part is that this doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like being productive, being responsible, being engaged. You're handling things. You're staying on top of everything until you realize you haven't actually experienced a moment of your life in years. You've only experienced your reactions to your life. Notice how your body feels right now reading this. Is your jaw clenched? Are your shoulders up by your ears? Is your breath shallow? These are signs of activation. Your nervous system responding to words on a page. Now notice, there's no actual threat here. No emergency. Nothing requiring defense or escape. But your body might be responding anyway, because it's learned that everything requires response. The email you need to answer. The conversation you need to have. The problem you need to solve. The feeling you need to fix. Your nervous system has become so efficient at reacting that it reacts to the possibility of things that might require reactions. You can't think your way out of this exhaustion. You can't decide to be less reactive and have it be so. What you can do is start noticing the cost, the accumulation, the way each small reaction drains you just a little, because seeing the problem is the beginning of solving it. Chapter 3. What you're actually defending against. I'm in therapy, talking about why I get so defensive when my partner asks simple questions, and my therapist says something that stops me cold. What are you defending against? I start to answer, start to explain that I'm defending my choices, my intelligence, my competence, and she stops me. No, she says. What are you actually defending against? I sit there, confused. Isn't that what I just said? But she waits. And in that waiting, something shifts. Because when I get really honest, when I stop giving the surface answer and drop down into what I'm actually feeling when I react, it's not about defending my choices at all. It's about defending against a feeling. The feeling that I might be wrong, that I might not be enough, that I might be exposed as someone who doesn't have it all figured out. Every reaction I have, every defensive response, every irritated snap, every anxious spiral, isn't about the present moment. It's about protecting myself from a feeling I've decided I can't handle. Most of your reactions aren't about what's happening. They're about what you're afraid might happen if you don't react. This is the part we don't talk about enough. We focus on managing reactions, controlling emotions, staying calm. But we never ask the deeper question. What are all these reactions protecting you from feeling? I'm working with a client named David, who gets furious every time someone questions his decisions at work. Not mildly annoyed, furious. The kind of anger that makes him send emails he regrets, that ruins his whole day, that keeps him up at night rehearsing arguments. Why does it bother you so much? I ask him. Because they're questioning my judgment, he says immediately. Okay, and if they question your judgment, what does that mean? He pauses. That they think I'm incompetent. And if they think you're incompetent, another pause, longer this time. That maybe I am. There it is. The thing beneath the thing. David's reactions aren't about defending his decisions. They're about defending against the terror of discovering he might actually be the incompetent person he secretly fears he is. Every question from a colleague isn't just a question. It's a potential confirmation of his deepest fear about himself. So he reacts strongly, immediately. Because if he can shut down the question, he can avoid the feeling. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is how most reactions work. They're not responses to what's happening. They're defenses against what you're afraid of feeling. Someone criticizes you, and you get defensive. Not because the criticism is wrong, but because feeling criticized might confirm the story that you're not good enough. Your partner is quiet, and you get anxious, not because their silence means anything, but because silence might mean they're pulling away, which might mean you're unlovable. Your kid doesn't listen, and you get angry, not because they're being defiant, but because their defiance might mean you're a bad parent. The reaction isn't about them. It's about the feeling you're protecting yourself from having to feel. Here's what changed everything for me. The moment I realized my reactions were defenses, I could start asking a different question. Not why is this person making me angry, but what am I afraid I'll feel if I don't get angry? Not why is this situation so stressful, but what feeling am I trying to avoid by staying stressed? The answers were always the same few feelings: inadequacy, unworthiness, powerlessness, abandonment, shame. And here's the devastating truth. By constantly reacting to avoid these feelings, I was actually creating more of them. My defensiveness made people pull away, which made me feel more abandoned. My perfectionism created more chances to fail, which made me feel more inadequate. My need to control everything exhausted me, which made me feel more powerless. I was creating the very things I was trying to avoid. I watch this pattern with almost everyone I work with. The person who's terrified of rejection becomes so guarded that people can't get close to them, creating more rejection. The person who's afraid of being controlled becomes so rigid that they push away support, creating more powerlessness. The person who fears being seen as incompetent becomes so defensive that they can't learn, creating more actual incompetence. Your reactions aren't protecting you. They're imprisoning you in the exact pattern you're trying to escape. Think about your 3 strongest recurring reactions. The thing that makes you defensive. The situation that makes you anxious. The person who triggers your anger. Now ask, what feeling am I defending against here? Not the surface feeling. The deep one. The one you've spent years making sure you never have to fully feel. Inadequacy, shame, powerlessness, unworthiness, abandonment, humiliation. Your reactions are a map. They show you exactly what you're afraid of feeling. And once you see the map, you can start asking a radical question. What if I just felt it? What if, instead of defending against inadequacy, I just let myself feel inadequate for a moment? What if, instead of reacting to avoid shame, I just let shame move through me? Because here's what I've discovered. The feelings you're defending against, they're not actually that bad. They're uncomfortable, yes, but they're not dangerous. They won't destroy you. They're just sensations in your body, thoughts in your mind, experiences passing through. What's dangerous is the defense, the constant reactivity, the exhausting vigilance, the way you've organized your entire life around not feeling certain feelings. You're not reacting to what's happening. You're reacting to what you're afraid you'll discover about yourself if you stop reacting. Chapter 4. The difference between feeling and being. I'm sitting with a feeling I've spent 30 years avoiding, and I'm not dying. That's the first thing I notice. The second thing I notice is that I always thought this feeling would be larger, more consuming, more permanent, more catastrophic. But it's not. It's just a feeling. I'm in my car, parked outside my house, and I've just had a conversation with a friend who called out something I did that hurt them. My first instinct was to defend, to explain, to make it not my fault. But I didn't. I just listened. I apologized. I sat with the fact that I had caused harm without meaning to. And now I'm feeling something I've organized my whole life around not feeling. I feel like a bad person. Not in an abstract way. Not in a we all make mistakes intellectual way. In a visceral body level, this is what I actually am way. My chest is tight. My throat aches. There's a heaviness that feels like it might never lift. And I sit with it. I don't argue with it. I don't try to think my way out of it. I don't pull up evidence of times I've been good to counteract this feeling. I just let myself feel like a bad person. 5 minutes pass. The feeling is still there, but something's different. I notice that while I feel like a bad person, I'm not actually becoming a bad person. The feeling isn't transforming my identity. It's just happening. Like weather. Here's what nobody tells you. There's a profound difference between feeling something and being something. You can feel inadequate without being inadequate. You can feel unlovable without being unlovable. You can feel like a failure without being a failure. The feeling is just information passing through your nervous system. It's not a truth about your identity. But we've collapsed these two things together. We've decided that if we feel ashamed, we are shameful. If we feel powerless, we are powerless. If we feel rejected, we are rejectable. And so we react desperately, automatically, to avoid having to feel feelings we've mistaken for facts about who we are. Let me show you exactly where this breaks down. I'm working with a client named Sarah who has panic attacks before presentations. Not because she's bad at presenting, she's actually excellent. But because somewhere along the line, she decided that feeling nervous means she's incompetent. So every time her body generates the sensation of nervousness, which is just adrenaline, just activation, just energy, her mind interprets it as proof that she's not capable. And then she panics about the nervousness, which creates more nervousness, which she takes as more proof of incompetence, which creates more panic. She's not actually incompetent. She's just feeling sensations she's misinterpreting as truth. What if the nervousness doesn't mean anything about your competence? I ask her, what if it's just your body preparing you to perform? She looks at me like I've suggested the earth is flat. But it feels like I'm going to fail. Right, it feels like that. But are those feelings accurate predictors of your actual performance? We look at her history. Dozens of presentations. Many of them she felt nervous before. How many did she actually fail? None. The feeling of nervousness has never once accurately predicted her performance. But she's been treating it like a reliable oracle, reacting to it as if the feeling itself is the danger. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is what most of us do. We've confused the map with the territory, the feeling with the fact, the weather of our inner experience with the truth of our outer reality. You feel rejected, so you believe you are rejectable. You feel anxious, so you believe danger is real. You feel angry, so you believe you've been wrong. You feel inadequate, so you believe you are inadequate. But feelings aren't facts. They're just sensations with stories attached. Once you separate these, once you can feel something without believing it's telling you truth about reality, everything changes. I started practicing this with the smallest feelings first. Irritation. I'd feel irritated at some small inconvenience, and instead of reacting to fix the inconvenience, I'd just feel irritated. Let it be there. Notice where it lived in my body. Watch how it moved and changed and eventually passed. What I discovered was shocking. Irritation, when you just feel it without reacting to it, lasts about 90 seconds. 90 seconds. But when you react to it, when you complain about it, when you try to fix whatever caused it, when you build a story about how this always happens to you, it can last for hours, days. The feeling itself is brief. The reaction to the feeling is what makes it permanent. I started applying this to bigger feelings. Inadequacy. Instead of immediately defending against it or trying to prove my competence, I'd just sit with the sensation of feeling inadequate. I'd notice the tightness in my chest, the heaviness in my limbs, the specific quality of the thoughts that came with it. And I'd remind myself, I feel inadequate. This feeling is real, but it's not telling me truth about my actual adequacy. It's just a sensation passing through. The first few times I did this, it was terrifying. Because without the reaction, without the defense, I had to face the feeling directly. I had to let myself experience inadequacy without immediately reaching for evidence that I'm actually adequate. But here's what happened. The feeling passed. Not because I fixed it. Not because I proved it wrong. Just because feelings, by their nature, pass. And in the passing, I discovered something profound. I could survive the feeling. I could feel inadequate and still be okay. The feeling wasn't dangerous. The reaction to the feeling was what created the danger. Think about the feeling you react most strongly to avoid. Maybe it's inadequacy. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe it's powerlessness. Maybe it's shame. Now notice, every time you feel this feeling approaching, you react. You defend. You avoid. You try to make it go away. But what if you didn't? What if you just let yourself feel inadequate for 2 minutes? Just let yourself feel rejected without immediately fixing it or explaining it away. Just let yourself feel powerless without grasping for control. What if you discovered that you can feel these things without becoming these things? Because that's the truth your reactions are hiding from you. You're strong enough to feel what you're afraid to feel. The feeling won't destroy you. But the constant defense against the feeling might. Chapter 5. The Practice of Allowing. I'm standing in my kitchen, and I've just dropped a full cup of coffee on the floor. The cup is shattered. Coffee is spreading across the tile, seeping into the grout. I'm already late for a meeting. My first thought is, of course, this happened. This always happens. And then I catch myself. I can feel the reaction forming, the frustration, the self-criticism, the mental spiral about being clumsy, about always ruining things, about how this is going to make me even later, and now I have to clean this up, and why can't I just hold onto a cup like a normal person? The whole cascade is ready to deploy. But instead of letting it deploy, I do something different. I allow the coffee to be on the floor. That sounds simple, maybe even absurd. Obviously, the coffee is on the floor. I don't have a choice about that. But what I mean is this. I stop resisting the reality that it's there. I stop arguing with the fact of the broken cup. I stop making this moment mean something about me or my day or my life. The coffee is on the floor. That's just what's true right now. And in that allowing, something shifts. My shoulders drop. My breath deepens. The reaction that was building doesn't build. I'm just a person standing in a kitchen with spilled coffee, and there's nothing to fix in me, nothing to defend, nothing to resist. I clean it up. I'm still late, but I'm not carrying the weight of my reaction to being late. This is what allowing actually means. Not passive acceptance. Not giving up. Not pretending you don't care. Allowing is the practice of letting reality be real before you decide what to do about it. Most of us skip this step completely. We go straight from thing happens to reaction to thing. We never let the moment just be what it is. We're immediately in argument with it, in defense against it, in story about what it means. I'm in a session with a client named Michael, who's furious because his teenage son just failed a class. Not disappointed, furious. He's already catastrophizing. This means he won't get into college. This means his future is ruined. This means I failed as a father. What if you just let him have failed the class? I ask. What do you mean, let him? He did fail. Right? But you're not actually responding to the failure. You're responding to all the stories you're telling about the failure. What if you just allowed the simple fact? He failed a class. That's what happened. Period. Michael looks at me like I'm suggesting he abandon his son. But I wait. So I just do nothing? He asks. No. You do nothing until you can see clearly what actually needs to be done. Right now, you can't see clearly because you're reacting to your stories, not responding to the situation. We sit with it. Just the fact. His son failed a class. Not his son is a failure. Not this ruins everything. Not I'm a bad parent. Just he failed a class. After a few minutes, Michael's energy completely changes. Okay, he says. He failed a class. That's not what I wanted, but it's what's real. So now what? Now he can respond. Not from fear, not from story, not from reaction, from clarity. The reason I'm telling you this is because allowing is the bridge between seeing and responding. It's the space where you stop being controlled by your automatic reactions and start choosing your actual response. But allowing is hard. It goes against everything we've been trained to do. We've been trained to fix, to prevent, to control, to resist, to defend. We've been trained that allowing something means approving of it. That acceptance means defeat. But that's not what allowing is. Allowing is just, this is what's true right now. You can allow something to be true and still work to change it. You can allow your current reality and still move toward a different reality. But you can't change what you won't first allow yourself to see clearly. I started practicing this with physical sensations first because they're simpler than emotional ones. Pain, for instance. I have chronic lower back pain from an old injury. For years, my relationship with this pain was constant resistance. Every time it flared up, I'd tense against it, fight it, try to will it away. This shouldn't be happening. I shouldn't still have this pain. Why won't it go away? The resistance actually made the pain worse. Tension compounds pain. One day, I tried something different. I felt the pain starting, and instead of resisting it, I allowed it. Not happily, not gladly. I didn't celebrate the pain or pretend I wanted it. I just acknowledged, this is what I'm feeling right now. I breathed into it instead of bracing against it. I let it be there without making it mean something about my body or my future or my worth. And something remarkable happened. The pain didn't go away, but my suffering decreased dramatically. Because suffering isn't just pain. It's pain plus resistance. When I stopped resisting, when I just allowed the sensation to be what it was, the suffering diminished. I applied this to emotions next. Sadness, which I'd spent decades trying to outrun. Instead of distracting myself the moment I felt it approaching, Instead of forcing positivity or productivity, I just sit with sadness. Let it be in my chest. Let it make my eyes water. Let it slow me down. And I'd notice sadness isn't actually a problem. It's uncomfortable, yes. But it's not dangerous. It's just a wave of sensation moving through. When I stopped resisting it, when I stopped making it mean something was wrong with me, it would crest and pass like any wave. The same with anxiety, with anger, with shame, with any feeling I'd been taught to manage, control, or eliminate. Allowing them didn't make them permanent. Resistance made them permanent. Think about what you're resisting right now in your life. Maybe it's a situation at work. Maybe it's something about your body. Maybe it's a dynamic in your relationship. Maybe it's a feeling you keep trying to push away. Notice the energy you're putting into resistance, the mental effort of arguing with reality, the physical tension of bracing against what is. What if you just allowed it, just for a moment, not forever, not as a final answer, just as a starting point? This situation is what it is. This feeling is what it is. This moment is what it is. Can you let it be that, just for now? Because here's what I've discovered. The moment you stop resisting reality, you gain access to your actual power to respond to it. Resistance keeps you stuck in reaction. Allowing creates space for response. You can't change what you're busy resisting. You can only change what you're willing to see clearly. And allowing is how you see clearly. Chapter 6. Building the Witness. I'm having a panic attack in a grocery store, and for the first time, I'm watching it happen. Not in a detached way. Not like I'm above it or beyond it. I'm in it. My heart is racing. My chest is tight. My thoughts are spiraling. But there's also a part of me that's observing the whole process. It's like being in two places at once, in the panic and watching the panic. The watching part notices my heart rate is elevated. My breathing is shallow. My mind is generating catastrophic thoughts. My body is preparing to run, even though there's nowhere to run from a grocery store on a Tuesday afternoon. And that watching part, that witness, creates just enough space that I'm not completely consumed by the panic. I'm experiencing it, but I'm not drowning in it. This is the difference between being your reaction and having your reaction. Most of the time, you are your reactions. When anxiety shows up, you become anxious. When anger appears, you become angry. There's no separation between the feeling and your identity. You don't have anxiety. You are anxiety. You don't experience anger. You are anger. But there's another way to be with your experience. You can develop what I call the witness, the part of you that can observe what's happening without being swept away by it. The witness is already there. You've experienced it before, in small moments. Like when you catch yourself in a bad mood and think, why am I so irritable today? That question comes from the witness, the part that can see your irritability rather than just being irritable. Or when you're in an argument and some part of you thinks I'm overreacting right now. That's the witness, observing your reaction even as it's happening. The problem is that for most of us, the witness only shows up occasionally, accidentally, and briefly. We need to strengthen it, train it, learn to access it intentionally, especially in the moments we most need it. Let me show you how I learned to do this. I'm working with a meditation teacher, and she's guiding me through a body scan. We're not doing anything fancy, just noticing sensations. She asks me to notice tension in my jaw. I notice it. There's tightness there, a clenching I wasn't aware of until she pointed it out. Good, she says. Now notice the part of you that's noticing the tension. This stops me completely. The part that's noticing? I'm noticing the tension. Isn't that enough? But then I get it. There's the tension itself, the physical sensation in my jaw. And then there's the awareness of that tension, the part of me that can observe it, feel it, know it's there. That awareness is the witness. And here's what's profound. The witness itself is never tense. It's never anxious. It's never panicked. The witness just observes. It sees tension without being tense. It sees panic without panicking. It sees anger without becoming angry. The reason I'm telling you this is because learning to access the witness is what makes see everything, react to nothing possible. When you're completely identified with your reactions, you have no choice. The anger happens, and you are the anger. The anxiety happens, and you are the anxiety. There's no gap, no space, no possibility of a different response. But when you can access the witness, even for just a moment, you create separation. You're no longer the anger. You're the person experiencing anger. You're no longer the anxiety. You're the person noticing anxiety moving through your system. And in that separation, choice becomes possible. I started practicing this deliberately with small irritations throughout my day. Someone would cut me off in traffic, and I'd feel anger rising. But instead of becoming that anger, I'd try to notice it. There's anger. My face is getting hot. My jaw is clenching. Thoughts about that driver's incompetence are appearing. At first, this felt awkward, mechanical, almost fake. But something was happening beneath the awkwardness. I was creating distance between myself and my reactions. The anger was still there, but I wasn't completely consumed by it. There was me, and there was the anger I was experiencing. Two things, not one. I practiced this with bigger emotions. A conflict with my partner would trigger defensiveness, and I'd catch it. There's defensiveness. The defensiveness didn't disappear, but I wasn't helpless in the face of it anymore. I could see it happening, and seeing it gave me the option to choose differently. The witness isn't about suppressing emotions or pretending they're not real. It's about changing your relationship to them. I had a client named Rachel who was drowning in grief after her mother's death. She'd come to me desperate to get over it, to stop being so sad all the time. But she wasn't sad all the time. She was identified with sadness. She had become her grief. When grief appeared, there was no Rachel anymore, just a person-shaped container for an overwhelming feeling. What if you don't have to stop being sad? I asked her. What if you just learn to be the person who's experiencing sadness? She didn't understand the difference at first. I am the person experiencing sadness. That's the problem. No, you've become the sadness itself. There's no space between you and the feeling. But there's another way to be with grief. You can be the one witnessing the grief, holding it, allowing it to move through you, without losing yourself in it. We practiced this together. When grief would rise, instead of drowning in it, she'd practice observing it. There's grief. It's in my chest. It's heavy. It's making my eyes water. It's making me want to curl up. The grief didn't go away. But Rachel didn't disappear into it anymore. There was Rachel, and there was the grief Rachel was experiencing. She could hold the grief without being crushed by it. That's what the witness makes possible. Think about your most overwhelming emotion, the one that takes you over completely when it appears. Maybe it's rage. Maybe it's despair. Maybe it's terror. Maybe it's shame. The next time it appears, try this. Describe it to yourself in the third person. Not I'm so angry, but there's anger here. Not I'm terrified, but fear is present. Not I'm worthless, but a story about worthlessness is appearing. This shift in language creates distance. It activates the witness. You're not denying the emotion. You're not minimizing it. You're just observing it from a slight distance, enough distance that you're not completely consumed by it. Here's what I've discovered. The witness grows stronger with practice. The more you observe your reactions, instead of being your reactions, the more natural it becomes. The gap between stimulus and response, that space where choice lives, gets wider. And in that widening space, you discover something profound. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are not your reactions. You are the awareness that notices all of these things. And that awareness, it can't be overwhelmed. It can't be damaged. It can witness anything without being destroyed by it. This is freedom. Not freedom from difficult emotions, but freedom in the midst of them. You can see everything, all your thoughts, all your feelings, all your reactions, without being hijacked by any of it. That's what the witness gives you. Chapter 7. When you fall back into reaction. I'm yelling at my kid over spilled milk. Actual, literal spilled milk. And halfway through my tirade, I realize what I'm doing. I can hear myself. I can hear the sharpness in my tone, the disproportionate anger, the way I'm making a 3-second accident into evidence of carelessness and disrespect. I can see my daughter's face shutting down, closing off. And I realize I'm doing exactly what I've spent months learning not to do. I'm reacting. Automatically. Completely. Like none of the work I've done matters. Here's what nobody tells you about learning to see without reacting. You will fall back into reaction. Over and over. Sometimes within minutes of telling yourself you've figured it out. This isn't failure. This is the process. The woman in the coffee shop line checking her phone obsessively. That was me yesterday. The person snapping at their partner over a small thing. That was me this morning. The one spiraling into anxiety about something that probably won't happen. That was me an hour ago. I haven't transcended reactivity. I've just learned to catch myself faster when I fall into it. And the catching is everything. Before, I would yell at my kid, feel terrible afterward, and then spend the rest of the day in a shame spiral about what a bad parent I am. The reaction would create more reactions, guilt, self-criticism, defensiveness, until the original moment was buried under layers of subsequent reactions. But this time, something different happens. I catch myself mid-yell. I stop. I take a breath. And I say, I'm sorry. I'm reacting to something that isn't actually a big deal. You spilled milk. That's okay. Let's clean it up together. My daughter looks at me, surprised. And then we clean up the milk. That's it. That's the whole story. No shame spiral. No hours of self-flagellation. No defensive justification for why I had a right to be upset. Just, I fell into reaction. I caught it. I corrected course. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is what mastery actually looks like. Not never reacting, but catching yourself when you do and choosing differently. You're not trying to become someone who never gets triggered. You're becoming someone who notices when they're triggered and can interrupt the pattern. I watch this expectation destroy people. They learn about reactivity. They practice witnessing. They have a few good days where they stay calm and present, and then they react strongly to something and conclude they've failed. They haven't learned anything. They're still broken. But that's not how change works. Change isn't linear. It's not. Reactive person practices witnessing enlightened person who never reacts again. It's more like reactive person practices witnessing, it still reacts, but catches it faster, still reacts, but catches it even faster, builds enough awareness that reactions become less intense and less frequent, but they never completely disappear. I had a meditation teacher who'd been practicing for 30 years tell me she still gets road rage sometimes, but now, instead of staying angry for the whole drive, she catches it within seconds. There's road rage. My body is activated. Thoughts about that driver are appearing. And it passes. That's what we're aiming for. Not perfection. Not immunity to triggers. Just faster recovery. The practice isn't about never falling. It's about learning to get back up quickly. Here's what helps. Expect to fall back. Plan for it. Don't be surprised when you find yourself in full reaction mode despite everything you've learned. Your nervous system has been training in reactivity for decades. It's not going to unlearn that in a few weeks or months. The old patterns will still activate, sometimes with their original intensity. But each time they activate, you have an opportunity. Not to stop them, you can't stop them mid-activation, but to notice them, to name them, to recognize I'm in reactive mode right now, and choose how to respond to being in reactive mode. I practice this with my morning anxiety. Most mornings I wake up with a low-level dread about the day ahead. For years, I tried to eliminate this. Meditation, journaling, gratitude practices, anything to make the anxiety go away. But it kept coming back. Every morning, there it was. Finally, I stopped trying to eliminate it and just started noticing it. There's morning anxiety. My chest is tight. My mind is scanning for threats. My body thinks something bad is about to happen, even though I'm just lying in bed. The anxiety is still there, but I'm not fighting it anymore. Now, I'm not making it mean something's wrong with me. This is how my nervous system wakes up. Note it. And because I'm not resisting it, it passes faster. Usually within 10 minutes of getting up and moving. The falling back happens with bigger things too. I'll go weeks feeling relatively calm and centered, and then something will hit. A rejection, a conflict, a disappointment, and I'll spiral completely. All my practices will seem to vanish. I'll be back in full reactive mode, convinced the world is ending. And then, eventually I'll remember, I'm in reaction. This is what reaction feels like. I've been here before. I know how to work with this. Not immediately. Not gracefully. But I remember. Think about the last time you reacted strongly to something and felt disappointed in yourself afterward. Maybe you snapped at someone. Maybe you spiraled into anxiety. Maybe you shut down completely. What if, instead of judging yourself for reacting, you just noticed, I fell into reaction. That's okay. That's part of the process. What do I do now? Because the falling isn't the problem. Staying down is the problem. Every time you catch yourself in reaction, even if it's after the fact, even if it's hours later, you're strengthening the witness. You're creating more space between stimulus and response. You're building the muscle that will let you catch it faster next time. This is the practice, not perfection. Just persistent attention to the moments when you lose yourself and gentle redirection back to presence. You will fall back into reaction. That's guaranteed. The question isn't whether you'll fall. It's how quickly you'll notice you've fallen and choose to stand back up. Chapter 8. The Practice That Makes It Permanent. I'm sitting at my kitchen table at 6 a.m., coffee in hand, doing something that looks like nothing. I'm not meditating, not journaling, not following any elaborate morning routine. I'm just sitting here, noticing what it feels like to be alive in this moment before the day's demands begin. The coolness of the mug against my palms, the sound of birds outside, the particular quality of early morning light, the sensation of breathing, the thoughts appearing and dissolving like clouds. This is my practice. 5 minutes of just being here, seeing everything, reacting to nothing. It doesn't look like much, but this is what's changed everything. The ability to see without reacting isn't something you master once and then have forever. It's not a skill you learn and check off your list. It's a practice you return to again and again, every day for the rest of your life. And that practice has to be simple enough that you'll actually do it. Most people fail at this not because they don't understand it, but because they try to make it too complicated. They think they need hour-long meditation sessions or elaborate rituals or perfect conditions. But the practice that sticks is the one you can do anywhere, anytime, in any condition. Let me show you exactly what I do. Every morning, I sit for 5 minutes and practice witnessing. I don't try to calm my mind. I don't try to feel peaceful. I don't try to achieve any particular state. I just notice what's happening. Thoughts appear. I notice them. There's a thought about my meeting today. Emotions arise. I notice them. There's anxiety about that conversation. Sensations occur. I notice them. There's tension in my shoulders. I'm not trying to change anything. I'm just practicing the basic skill, seeing without immediately reacting. Some mornings my mind is quiet. Some mornings it's chaotic. Doesn't matter. The practice isn't about the content of my experience. It's about my relationship to the content. Can I see my thoughts without believing them? Can I feel my emotions without being controlled by them? Can I notice my reactions without acting on them? That's the practice. And 5 minutes is enough. The reason I'm telling you this is because you don't need more information about reactivity. You don't need more concepts or frameworks or understanding. You need practice. Daily, consistent, boring practice. And the practice works because of something called neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself based on what you repeatedly do. Every time you react automatically, you strengthen the reactive pathway. Every time you pause and witness, you strengthen the witness pathway. It's that simple. I had a client named Tom who was skeptical about this. 5 minutes of sitting isn't going to change decades of reactive patterns, he said. You're right, I told him. 5 minutes once won't. But 5 minutes every day for 90 days will literally restructure your neural pathways. Your brain will form new patterns. The witness will become more automatic than the reaction. He tried it. Not because he believed it would work, but because 5 minutes was low enough commitment that he had no excuse not to. 90 days later, he came back to me stunned. I don't know what happened, but I'm different. My wife noticed. I didn't even tell her I was doing this, but she said I seem calmer, less on edge, and she's right. Things that used to set me off just don't anymore. Or they do, but I can't. What happened is exactly what I told him would happen. His brain rewired. The practice became the default. But the practice only works if you actually do it. And you'll only do it if it's simple. Here's the simplest version. 5 minutes. Every day. Same time if possible, but any time works. Sit comfortably. Set a timer. Close your eyes or keep them open. Doesn't matter. Notice what's here. Thoughts, feelings, sensations, sounds. Just notice. Name them if it helps. Thinking, feeling anxious, tight chest, bird sounds. When you get lost in thought, which you will, that's not a problem. That's the practice. You got lost. You noticed you got lost. That noticing is the witness. That's exactly what you're training. Return to noticing. Again and again. For 5 minutes. That's it. That's the whole practice. No mantras. No visualization. No trying to achieve any special state. Just repeatedly practicing the skill of seeing what's happening without immediately reacting to what's happening. And then, and this is crucial, you bring that practice into your day. You're in line at the grocery store, feeling impatient, and you notice, there's impatience. My body wants to move faster. Thoughts about how long this is taking are appearing. You're not trying to stop being impatient. You're just noticing it. You're in a meeting. Someone says something that triggers defensiveness and you catch it. There's defensiveness rising. My jaw is clenching. My mind is preparing arguments. You might still feel defensive, but you're not immediately acting from it. You're with your kid, they're having a meltdown, and you notice there's frustration. There's the urge to yell. There's tension in my shoulders. You might still need to set a boundary, but you're doing it from awareness, not pure reaction. The formal practice trains the skill. The informal practice, bringing it into daily life, makes it permanent. I've been doing this for 3 years now. 5 minutes every morning, and countless micro moments of witnessing throughout my day. I still react. I still get triggered. I still lose my temper and spiral into anxiety and shut down defensively. But it happens less. It's less intense. And I recover faster. The woman in the coffee shop at the beginning of this audiobook, the one checking her phone, shoulders up by her ears, barely holding it together. I still have those moments. But I also have more moments where I'm just here, present, seeing what's happening without needing it to be different, experiencing my life instead of defending against it. That's what the practice gives you. Not perfection, not some permanent state of enlightened calm, just more moments of presence, more choice, more freedom, and more is enough. Think about where you can put 5 minutes in your day. Not when it's convenient. Not when you feel like it. When? Specifically. Every day. Before coffee? After lunch? Before bed? Pick a time that's already part of your routine and anchor the practice there. And then just do it. Every day. Even when it feels pointless. Especially when it feels pointless. Because here's what I've learned. The days when the practice feels most pointless are often the days when you need it most. Your reactive patterns have had decades to establish themselves. You're not going to undo them overnight. But you can, slowly, patiently, consistently, build something new. A new default. A new pattern. A new way of being that sees everything and reacts to nothing. 5 minutes a day. That's all it takes. The practice is simple. The commitment is simple. What's not simple is actually doing it. But that's where everything changes. Not in understanding. In practice. So practice. Chapter 9. The stories you tell about everything. I'm reading an old journal entry from 5 years ago, and I'm shocked by what I find. The entry is about a dinner party where I was convinced, absolutely certain, that everyone there thought I was boring. I remember that night vividly. The way I felt invisible. The way every attempt at conversation fell flat. The way I left early, mortified, sure that I'd never be invited back. But here's what's shocking. I ran into one of the people from that party last week. We got coffee, and she brought up that dinner. That was such a great night, she said. I remember you told that story about your trip to Portugal. I was dying laughing. I actually used that story at another party. I hope you don't mind. I stare at her, confused. That's not the night I remember at all. In my memory, in my journal entry, in the story I've been carrying for 5 years, I was boring, invisible, a failure at social interaction. But in her memory, I was funny, engaging, memorable. Same night, why? Same objective reality. Completely different stories. And here's what stops me cold. I've been living in my story, not in reality. You don't experience your life. You experience your story about your life. This is one of the most important things I've ever realized about reactivity, and it took me years to see it clearly. Every moment of your life, your brain is taking in raw data, sights, sounds, sensations, events, and immediately converting that data into story. And then you react to the story, not to the data. Your partner is quiet at dinner. That's the data. But your brain doesn't just register quiet, it creates a story. They're mad at me. I did something wrong. They're pulling away. This relationship is in trouble. And then you react to that story. You get defensive. You withdraw. You pick a fight to force them to talk. You create exactly the distance you were afraid of. But the original data was just quiet. I'm working with a client named Jennifer, who's convinced her boss hates her. She has evidence. He doesn't smile when he passes her desk. He didn't invite her to a meeting last week. He gave her feedback on a project. He's trying to push me out, she says. He wants me to quit. What did he actually say when he gave you feedback? I ask. She pulls up the email. I read it. It's completely neutral. Professional. Specific. It's actually good feedback, the kind that helps you improve. Okay, I say. So the data is, he sent you professional feedback on a project. The story you're telling is, he hates you and wants you to quit. Do you see the difference? She's quiet for a long moment. I guess I added a lot. You didn't add it on purpose. Your brain did it automatically. It took neutral data and created a story that confirmed your existing fear. And now you're reacting to the story, not to what actually happened. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is how most of you, not by reality, but by the stories you tell about reality. Someone doesn't text back for 3 hours. Data, no text. Story, they're mad. They don't care. You said something wrong. They're ghosting you. Reaction, anxiety, checking your phone obsessively, crafting the perfect follow-up message. Your kid gets a bad grade. Data, low score on a test. Story, they're falling behind. They'll fail the class. They won't get into college. Their future is ruined. You failed as a parent. Reaction, panic, lecturing, hovering, creating more pressure. A colleague questions your approach. Data, a question. Story, they think you're incompetent. They're undermining you. They want your position. You need to defend yourself. Reaction, defensiveness, territorial behavior, creating an enemy. The data is almost always neutral. The story makes it threatening. And here's what's devastating. You believe your stories so completely that you can't even see them as stories. They feel like truth, like accurate perception of reality. But they're not. They're interpretation, narrative, and Fiction your brain generates based on past experiences, current fears, and inherited patterns. I started catching my stories by asking one simple question. What's the actual data here, separate from my interpretation, my partner's sighs while I'm talking? Data, exhaled breath. My interpretation, they're annoyed with me, I'm talking too much, they wish I'd stop. But when I ask them, are you annoyed? They look confused. No, I'm just tired. Why? My story wasn't reality. It was just my story. Traffic is slow. Data. Cars moving at 15 miles per hour. My interpretation. This is terrible. This shouldn't be happening. Everyone's a bad driver. My day is ruined. But it's just traffic. It's not personal. It's not a conspiracy. It's not evidence that the universe is against me. It's just cars moving slowly. The more I practiced separating data from story, the more I realized most of what I react to doesn't actually exist. It exists in my mind, in my narrative, in my interpretation, but not in reality. Here's a practice that changed everything for me. When I notice a strong reaction, I write down two things. Data. What actually happened in observable facts? Story. What I'm telling myself it means. My boss didn't say good morning. Data. He walked past without speaking. Story. He's mad at me. I'm in trouble. I did something wrong. When I separate them like this, I can see how much I'm adding. And once I can see it, I can question it. Is there another possible story? Maybe he's preoccupied. Maybe he didn't see me. Maybe he's dealing with something difficult. Maybe he's just not a morning person. The data supports all of these stories equally. But I automatically chose the one that made me a victim, that confirmed my fear, that justified my anxiety. Your brain doesn't generate random stories. It generates stories that confirm what you already believe about yourself and the world. If you believe you're unwanted, your brain will interpret neutral data as rejection. If you believe you're incompetent, your brain will interpret feedback as attack. If you believe the world is dangerous, your brain will interpret uncertainty as threat. You're not reacting to what's happening. You're reacting to stories that confirm what you already fear. Think about your last strong reaction to something someone said or did. Write down the data. What actually objectively happened? Then write down your story, what you decided it meant. Look at the gap between those two things. That gap is where all your unnecessary suffering lies. Because here's the truth. You can't control the data of your life. You can't control what people say, what happens, what you encounter. But you can become aware of your stories. You can catch yourself in the act of turning data into drama. And once you can see your stories, not as truth, you can choose different ones. Or better yet, you can just stay with the data and not need a story at all. Chapter 10. Learning to respond instead of react. I'm driving, and someone cuts me off so aggressively that I have to hit my brakes to avoid a collision. Two things happen simultaneously. First response, my body activates. Adrenaline floods my system. My heart rate spikes. My hands grip the steering wheel. This is automatic. My nervous system doing what it's designed to do when sensing danger. But then there's a choice point. A fork in the road. Path 1. I can react. I can lay on my horn. I can speed up and cut them off back. I can spend the next 10 minutes rehearsing what I'd say to them if I could. I can let this moment poison the rest of my drive, my morning, my day. Path 2. I can respond. I can notice my activation without acting from it. I can acknowledge that was dangerous and my body is responding appropriately while choosing not to escalate. I can let the adrenaline move through and dissipate. I can arrive at my destination calm instead of carrying road rage into my first meeting. Same stimulus, completely different outcomes. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Most people think these words mean the same thing. They don't. The difference between them is the difference between being controlled by your life and being present in it. A reaction is automatic, unconscious, immediate, das Einwane. It bypasses your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for choice, and goes straight from stimulus to action. React comes from the Latin reagire, to act again, to repeat an action. You're not choosing, you're running a program. A response is conscious, chosen, aligned with your values. It includes the pause where you actually decide how you want to be in this moment. Respond comes from responder, to pledge, to promise, to answer. You're authoring your action, not repeating a pattern. Let me show you exactly what this looks like. I'm in a meeting, and someone dismisses my idea in a way that feels condescending. My immediate impulse, my reaction, is to get defensive, to explain why they're wrong, to make them understand that they're being disrespectful. But I've learned to catch that impulse before it becomes action. I feel the heat rising in my face. I notice the tightness in my chest. I hear my mind generating arguments. All of that is happening. I'm not suppressing it. But I don't speak from it. Instead, I pause. Just 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, I ask myself, how do I want to be in this moment? Do I want to be defensive, argumentative, someone who needs to win? Or do I want to be curious, open, someone who can hear feedback without taking it as attack? The reaction would make me feel powerful for 30 seconds and regretful for 3 days. The response will let me stay in integrity with who I actually want to be. So I respond, tell me more about your concern. I want to understand your perspective. Same stimulus, different outcome. Because I didn't react, I responded. The reason I'm telling you this is because learning to respond instead of react is the most practical application of everything we've covered so far. Seeing your reactions, witnessing your patterns, understanding your triggers, all of that is preparation for this moment. The moment when you have a choice between reaction and response. And you do have a choice, even when it doesn't feel like it. I know it feels like reactions just happen to you, like you can't help it. Like by the time you realize what's happening, you're already yelling or withdrawing or spiraling. But there's always a gap, even if it's tiny, even if it's just half a second. There's a space between stimulus and action where choice lives. Viktor Frankl, who survived concentration camps and wrote about finding meaning in suffering, said it perfectly. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Your work is to find that space, and then to widen it. Here's how I learned to do this. I started with low-stakes situations, not the big triggers. Those are too hard to practice with at first. I started with minor irritations. The grocery store line is moving slowly. My reaction, impulse, irritation, impatience, mental complaining. Instead, I practice responding, this line is slow. That's just what's true. I can use this time to breathe, to notice my surroundings, to be present instead of rushed. My kid interrupts me while I'm working. My reaction impulse, snap at them, show my frustration. Instead, I respond, pause, take a breath, turn to face them completely. I'm in the middle of something, but you're important to me. Can you give me 2 minutes to finish this thought, and then I'm all yours? Small moments, low stakes, but each one is practice in finding the gap and making a conscious choice. What I discovered is that responding gets easier with practice. The gap gets wider. The pause becomes more natural. My default starts to shift from automatic reaction to conscious response. But it only works if you practice. You can't wait for the big moment and expect to suddenly have this skill. You build it in the small moments, so it's available in the big ones. Here's the 3-step process I use for responding instead of reacting. Step 1. Pause. When you feel activation, physical, emotional, mental, stop, ... Don't speak. Don't act. Just pause. Even if it's only for 3 seconds. Breathe. This interrupts the automatic reaction pathway. Step 2. Choose. Ask yourself, how do I want to be in this moment? Not what do you want to say or do, but who do you want to be? Calm, nyan, curious, boundaried, clear. Let your values guide your response, not your reactivity. Step 3. Act. Now act from that chosen state. Your action might look similar to your reaction, but it comes from a different place. You're not controlled by the impulse. You're choosing it consciously. I use this process dozens of times a day now. Sometimes I nail it. Sometimes I forget and react anyway. But more and more, I'm responding instead of reacting. And the difference in my life is profound. My relationships are better because I'm not constantly reacting defensively. My work is better because I'm not making decisions from triggered states. My internal experience is better because I'm not at the mercy of every stimulus that comes my way. I remember working with Marcus, the client from Chapter 1, who struggled with anger. 6 months into learning to respond instead of react, he told me this story. His teenage daughter came home 2 hours past curfew. Didn't call. Didn't text. Just walked in like nothing was wrong. The old Marcus would have exploded. Would have yelled, punished, made her feel terrible. Would have reacted from fear, disguised as anger. But this Marcus paused. He felt all the activation. The fear that something had happened to her, the anger at being disrespected, the urge to assert authority through volume. And he chose how he wanted to be in this moment. A parent who sets clear boundaries while staying connected. I'm really glad you're safe, he said. And we need to talk about what just happened. But I need to calm down first, and you probably need to settle in. Let's talk in 30 minutes. His daughter was shocked. She was prepared for the explosion. Instead, she got a response. Boundaried, clear, but not reactive. When they talked 30 minutes later, it was an actual conversation. Not a lecture, not a fight. A conversation where she understood the impact of her choice, and he understood what had happened. They created a plan together instead of just imposing consequences from anger. That's what responding instead of reacting makes possible. Think about your most common reactive patterns. When you're criticized, do you defend immediately? When you're interrupted, do you snap? When you're disappointed, do you withdraw? When you're scared, do you control? These are reactions. Automatic programs running. Now imagine, what if you could pause in those moments? What if you could choose how to be instead of just reacting from pattern? Who would you choose to be? That choice is always available. In every moment, even the hardest ones. The reaction will always be there. It's biology, conditioning, habit. But you don't have to act from it. You can respond instead. And in that response, you reclaim your life from automatic patterns and start living as the person you actually want to be. Chapter 11. Living with Uncertainty Without Panic. I'm sitting in a doctor's waiting room, and I can feel my mind trying to kill me. Not literally, but it's doing its best impression. Because I'm waiting for test results, and my brain has decided that the only way to handle not knowing is to imagine every possible worst-case scenario in vivid detail. I notice what it's doing. I can see the thoughts appearing. What if it's cancer? What if I only have months left? What if I never get to see my daughter graduate? What if? And underneath all of those thoughts is the same desperate need. I need to know. Right now. I can't handle this uncertainty. I have to figure it out, prepare for it, control it somehow. But I can't. I can't know until the doctor comes in. No amount of catastrophizing will give me information I don't have. All it's doing is making me suffer through scenarios that probably won't happen. So I practice something I've learned to do with uncertainty. I let myself not know. I sit there in the not knowing. I feel the discomfort of it, the way my chest tightens, the way my mind reaches for certainty, like a drowning person reaching for shore. And I just let it be uncomfortable. I don't know what these results will say, and that's okay. I'll know when I know. The doctor comes in. The results are fine. Nothing serious. All that suffering was about something that wasn't even real. Most of your suffering isn't about what's actually happening. It's about your inability to tolerate not knowing what's going to happen. Uncertainty is the ultimate trigger. Your brain hates it more than almost anything else. Because uncertainty meant danger for our ancestors. Not knowing if there was food, if there was shelter, if there was threat, that was life or death. So your brain evolved to eliminate uncertainty at any cost. It will create false certainty, catastrophic stories, worst-case scenarios, anxious preparation, rather than sit with not knowing. But here's what's true now. Most uncertainty isn't dangerous. It's just uncomfortable. You don't know if you'll get the job. You don't know if the relationship will work out. You don't know if your kid will be okay. You don't know if your health will hold. You don't know if your decision was right. And your brain treats all of this not knowing like a crisis that needs to be solved immediately. So you ruminate. You research. You plan for every possibility. You try to control what can't be controlled. You make yourself sick with anxiety about futures that might never happen. All because you can't tolerate the simple truth. You don't know. And you won't know until you know. I learned this the hard way during a period when my business was struggling. Every day, I didn't know if I'd have enough clients next month. If I'd be able to pay my bills. If I'd need to get a regular job again. If everything I'd built would collapse. My mind wanted certainty. It wanted a plan, a guarantee, a way to eliminate the not knowing. So it catastrophized constantly. Imagined failure in detail. Prepared me for disaster. And every day I spent in that catastrophizing, I wasn't actually present for my life. I was living in imagined futures, suffering through scenarios that weren't real. Until one day I realized I could just be in uncertainty. I could just let myself not know and still be okay. I don't know what's going to happen with my business. I'll find out as it unfolds. Meanwhile, I can do the next right thing today and trust that I can handle whatever comes. The uncertainty didn't go away. But my suffering about the uncertainty decreased dramatically. The reason I'm telling you this is because learning to be okay with not knowing is advanced practice in seeing everything and reacting to nothing. Because uncertainty will make you react more than almost anything else. It will make you control, manipulate, predict, prepare, catastrophize. But you can learn to tolerate it, to sit with it, to let not knowing be part of your experience without letting it hijack your nervous system. Here's what helped me build this capacity. First, I started noticing how much energy I was spending trying to create false certainty. How much time I spent researching worst-case scenarios, making contingency plans for things that would probably never happen, trying to predict and control what was fundamentally unpredictable. All that energy could have gone into actually living my life. Instead, it went into fighting with uncertainty. Second, I practiced the phrase, "I don't know," and that's okay, out loud, to myself, over and over. My mind would spin into anxious questions. But what if this happens? What if that happens? What if? And I'd interrupt. I don't know. And that's okay. I'll handle whatever happens when it happens. At first, this felt terrifying. Like I was being irresponsible. Like I should be preparing for every possibility. But gradually I realized most of what I was preparing for never happened. And the things that did happen were never exactly what I'd prepared for anyway. All that preparation was just my mind's way of trying to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. It wasn't actually making me safer or more prepared. It was just making me exhausted. Third, I started distinguishing between productive action and anxiety management. Productive action. I don't know if I'll get this job, so I'll prepare well for the interview and then apply to other positions too. Anxiety management disguised as action. I don't know if I'll get this job, so I'll check my email every 5 minutes, research the company obsessively, rehearse the interview 50 times, and imagine every way it could go wrong. One of these addresses real uncertainty with real action. The other just creates more suffering while giving the illusion of control. I work with a client named Diana, who was spiraling about her daughter's college applications. She didn't know where her daughter would get in. She didn't know if they could afford it. She didn't know if her daughter would be happy wherever she ended up. So she tried to eliminate the uncertainty. She researched endlessly. She created spreadsheets comparing every school. She catastrophized about worst-case scenarios. She tried to control her daughter's choices. What's the actual question underneath all of this? I asked her. She thought for a moment. Will my daughter be okay? And can you know that right now? No. How? Can you ever really know that, even after she's in college? No, Bime. So what if you just let yourself not know? What if you accepted that you can't know if she'll be okay, and you trusted both her and yourself to handle whatever comes? This was deeply uncomfortable for Diana, not Dunwa, because accepting uncertainty felt like giving up responsibility, like she should be doing more, controlling more, preparing more. But what she was actually doing was making herself and her daughter miserable with anxiety that served no purpose. When she finally let go, when she finally said, I don't know what will happen, and I'll handle it when it happens, everything eased. Not because the uncertainty went away, but because she stopped fighting it. Her daughter got into a school. It wasn't her first choice. Diana didn't know if it was the right choice, but she was learning to be okay with not knowing. And her daughter, she ended up thriving there. Diana would never have known that in advance. She just had to trust the process and tolerate the uncertainty. Think about what uncertainty you're trying to eliminate right now. What are you trying to control that you can't control? What future are you trying to predict that you can't predict? What answer are you demanding that you can't have yet? Notice the energy you're putting into fighting with not knowing. And then try this practice. I don't know. And that's okay. I'll know when I know. Say it out loud. Feel how uncomfortable it is. Let the discomfort be there without trying to fix it. Because here's the profound truth. You've never actually had certainty. You've only ever had the illusion of certainty. Even the things you were sure about turned out differently than you expected. Certainty has always been a story your mind tells to make you feel safer. But it's never been real. What's real is this: life unfolds moment by moment. You make the best choice you can with the information you have. You handle what comes. You adjust as needed. You need to know how it will all turn out. You just need to be present for what's actually happening right now. And right now, you're okay. Even in the uncertainty, even in the not knowing, you're okay. That's not a promise that everything will work out how you want. It's a recognition that you're capable of being with whatever is, including the discomfort of not knowing what will be. You can see the uncertainty. You can feel the discomfort of it. And you don't have to react to it with catastrophizing, controlling, or false certainty. You can just be uncertain and be okay anyway. That's freedom. Chapter 12. The people who will test you most. I'm having dinner with my parents, and I can feel myself regressing. Not metaphorically. Literally regressing. I'm 42 years old, and within 15 minutes of sitting at this table, I'm acting like I'm 17 again. Defensive. Reactive. Desperate for approval while simultaneously pushing back against every suggestion. My mother makes a comment about my work, something neutral, maybe even supportive, and I hear it as criticism. My father asks about my plans for the holidays, and I hear it as control. They're not doing anything particularly triggering. They're just being themselves. But I'm reacting like my survival depends on it. Here's what I've learned. The people closest to you will test your practice more than anyone else. You can learn to stay calm with strangers. You can practice witnessing with acquaintances. You can respond instead of react with colleagues. But your family, your partner, your oldest friends, they have access to the oldest, deepest patterns you have. They know exactly how to activate you because they were there when those patterns were formed. And they don't even have to try. Their mere presence can trigger you back into ancient dynamics. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is where most people's practice falls apart. They think they've mastered reactivity because they can stay calm in traffic or at work. And then they go home for the holidays and discover they haven't mastered anything. They've just been practicing in easy mode. Your family is advanced level. Your partner is expert level. These are the relationships where your deepest wounds live, where your most automatic patterns run, where your need for approval or fear of rejection or desperate desire to be seen all converge into a perfect storm of reactivity. Let me show you what this actually looks like. I'm working with a client named Alex, who came to me frustrated because he'd been practicing everything we covered. Witnessing, allowing, responding instead of reacting, and it was working beautifully. At work, with friends, in public. But the moment he talked to his father on the phone, all of it disappeared. One comment about Alex's career choices, and he was defending himself like a teenager. One question about when he'd settle down, and he was flooded with shame and anger. Why does this happen? He asked me, genuinely confused. I can handle my boss questioning my decisions. I can handle strangers being rude. But my dad says one thing and I completely lose it because your boss isn't connected to the 5-year-old who needed his father's approval, I said. Your boss can't activate that wound. Your father can, without even trying. This is what makes family relationships so challenging. They're not just present moment interactions. They're layered with decades of history, unmet needs, old hurts, accumulated resentments, and deeply wired patterns of relating. When your father questions you, you're not just hearing the current question. You're hearing every time he questioned you growing up, every time he compared you to your sibling, every time his approval felt just out of reach. When your mother gives advice, you're not just hearing current advice. You're feeling every time she didn't trust you to figure things out yourself. Every time her worry felt like criticism. Every time her care felt like control. The present moment triggers the entire history, and you react to all of it at once. So what do? First, you stop expecting yourself to be perfect with the people who trigger you most. This isn't a failure of your practice. This is normal, expected, part of the work. You're not trying to never react with family. You're trying to catch it faster, recover quicker, and maybe, eventually, create some space between their trigger and your reaction. Second, you prepare. If you know you're going into a situation with people who activate you, you don't go in cold. You remind yourself beforehand, this person triggers my need for approval. I'm going to notice when that gets activated. I'm going to practice witnessing it instead of acting from it. I started doing this before family dinners. In the car, on the way there, I'd run through the likely triggers. My mother's comments about my weight, my father's questions about money, my brother's competitive energy. I'd remind myself, these are old patterns. They're going to activate. That's okay. I can notice them without being controlled by them. It didn't make me immune, but it gave me a fighting chance. Third, you practice the basics especially when you're activated. Pause. Breathe. Notice what's happening in your body. Name the pattern. There's the approval seeking. There's the defensive reaction. There's the old wound. Just naming it creates some distance. Not much, but enough. One. I'm back at that dinner with my parents. My mother makes another comment, and I feel the familiar surge of defensiveness. But this time, I catch it. I don't stop feeling defensive. I'm not suddenly calm and enlightened. I still feel the tightness in my chest, the heat in my face, the urge to explain myself. But I don't speak from it immediately. I take a breath. I notice there's defensiveness. There's the 5-year-old who needs mom to understand. There's the pattern. And then I choose what to say. Not from the pattern, but from my adult self, who understands that my mother's comment isn't actually an attack. That's an interesting perspective, Mom. I see it differently, but I appreciate you caring enough to think about it. It's not some enlightened response, but it's not pure reaction either. It's a response. Chosen. Conscious. My mother looks slightly surprised. Usually, I either defend immediately or shut down. This is new territory for both of us. The conversation continues. I'm still activated, but I'm managing it, moment by moment. Here's what I want you to understand. Your closest relationships are where the deepest healing happens. Not because they're easy, but because they're hard. Every time you practice responding instead of reacting with someone who knows exactly how to trigger you, you're rewiring decades of patterning. You're teaching your nervous system that you're safe even when old wounds get activated. You're proving to yourself that you can stay present even in the relationships that historically pull you out of presence. This is advanced work, and it's slow. You won't master it. You'll just get incrementally better at catching yourself, recovering faster, choosing more consciously. I had one moment with my father, years into this practice, that showed me how much had changed. He made a comment about a decision I'd made, something he disagreed with, something he would have handled differently. In the past, this would have triggered a defensive argument that ruined the rest of the visit. But this time, I just felt it. The old activation. The familiar pattern wanting to run. The defensiveness rising. And I said, "You know, Dad, you might be right. I made the choice that felt right to me, but I can see why you do it differently." He looked at me, surprised. And then he said something I'd never heard him say before. "Actually, maybe your way makes sense too." I hadn't thought about it like that. Decades of pattern interrupted. Not eliminated, but interrupted enough to allow something new. That's what's possible when you bring your practice into your closest relationships. Not perfection. Not the elimination of triggers. Just small moments where old patterns don't have to run automatically. Where new ways of relating become possible. Think about the person who triggers you most. Maybe it's a parent. Maybe it's a sibling. Maybe it's your partner. Maybe it's your child. What pattern always runs when you're with them? What old wound always gets activated? What automatic reaction always takes over? Now imagine, what if you could catch that pattern just 5 seconds faster next time? What if you could notice the activation and choose your response instead of running the program? You won't do it perfectly. You'll fall back into reaction many times. But each time you catch it, even after the fact, you're building new capacity. Your closest relationships are your greatest teachers. Not because they're easy, but because they show you exactly where your work is. And the work is this. Can you stay with yourself even when the people you love most trigger everything in you that needs healing? Can you see them clearly instead of through the lens of old wounds? Can you respond to who they are now instead of reacting to who they were then? This is the practice in the relationships that matter most. Chapter 14. The moment you stop fighting your life. I'm standing in my kitchen at 6 a.m., and I realize I'm not waiting for anything to be different. Not in a resigned way. Not in a defeated way. In a deeply peaceful way. The coffee maker is gurgling. Early morning light is coming through the window. My body is tired because I didn't sleep great. My mind is already generating thoughts about the day ahead. There's a tightness in my shoulders from yesterday's stress that hasn't fully released. All of this is just here, happening, done, real. And I'm not arguing with any of it. I'm not wishing I'd slept better. I'm not resenting the tightness in my shoulders. I'm not dreading the day ahead or replaying yesterday or planning how to optimize tomorrow. I'm just here, with what is, without needing it to be anything else. This is the moment I realize I've stopped fighting my life. For decades, I was at war with reality. Not consciously, not dramatically, but constantly, subtly, exhaustingly. Every moment carried this undercurrent of this should be different. I should be different. Other people should be different. Circumstances should be different. My entire life was organized around this fight, trying to make things match my ideas about how they should be, trying to eliminate discomfort, trying to control the uncontrollable, trying to force life into shapes it didn't naturally take. And all of that fighting created the very suffering I was trying to escape. The reason I'm telling you this is because this is where all the practice has been leading. Not to some transcendent state. Not to permanent bliss. Not to a life without difficulty. To this, the moment you stop fighting what is and start being with what is. This is freedom. Not freedom from your life, but freedom in your life. Not freedom from difficulty, but freedom to be present with difficulty without making it worse through resistance. Let me show you what I mean. I used to fight with my body constantly. It was too tired, too tense, too achy, too something. Every sensation was wrong, evidence that something needed fixing, Proof that I wasn't doing life right. Even good sensations I'd fight with. Pleasure would appear, and immediately my mind would try to hold on to it, extend it, make it permanent. Which meant I couldn't actually enjoy it because I was too busy trying to keep it from leaving. Now, oh, my body does what it does. It's tired sometimes. It hurts sometimes. It feels good sometimes. And I'm just with it, noticing without needing it to be different. My shoulder is tight right now as I stand here with my coffee. Before, that would have launched a whole cascade. Why is it always tight? What am I doing wrong? I need to fix this. Maybe I need a new chair. Maybe I need physical therapy. Maybe I need physical therapy. Now it's just tight shoulder. Notice. Not a problem to solve. Just what's true right now. The same with emotions. I used to fight every uncomfortable feeling. Sadness meant something was wrong that needed fixing. Anxiety meant danger that needed eliminating. Anger meant injustice that needed correcting. Every feeling was a problem that demanded my immediate response. Now feelings are just weather. They arise. They move through. They pass. I don't need to fight them or fix them or figure out what they mean. They're just part of being alive. I can feel sad without making sadness a problem. I can feel anxious without treating anxiety like an emergency. I can feel angry without needing to immediately act on anger. The feelings are real, but they're not threats. They're not enemies. They're just part of the full spectrum of human experience. I'm working with a client named Sarah, who's been practicing everything we've covered for about a year. She comes to our session and tells me this story. She had a terrible day at work. Multiple things went wrong. She made a mistake that cost her team time. Her boss was frustrated. A colleague was passive-aggressive. By any measure, it was a genuinely difficult day. And here's the weird part, she says. I wasn't okay with it, like it sucked. It was hard. I felt all the feelings, embarrassment, frustration, disappointment. So what's weird about that? I asked. I wasn't fighting with it. I wasn't making it mean something about me. I wasn't catastrophizing about losing my job or being a failure. I was just in a hard day, having the experience of a hard day, and somehow that made it bearable in a way hard days have never been before. This is exactly it. This is the shift. She didn't transcend the difficult day. She didn't positive think her way out of it. She didn't detach or numb or spiritually bypass. She just stopped fighting with the reality that it was a hard day. And in that stopping, the suffering decreased. Not the difficulty was real. But the suffering we add on top of difficulty through resistance, through story, through fighting with what is, that suffering is optional. And it's what disappears when you stop fighting. Here's what nobody tells you. Most of your suffering isn't caused by your circumstances. It's caused by your relationship to your circumstances. The difficulty is real. The pain is real. The challenge is real. But the suffering, the layer of this shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? I can't handle this. This isn't fair. That's created by resistance. When you stop resisting, the difficulty remains, but the suffering decreases. I learned this most clearly during a period of genuine loss. Someone I loved died. The grief was real. The pain was real. I'm not suggesting any of that was optional or could be positive thought away. But I noticed something. When I just let myself grieve, when I didn't fight the sadness or try to rush through it or make it mean something about my strength or weakness, the grief was painful, but it wasn't suffering. It was just grief, moving through, doing what grief does. But when I resisted it, when I tried to push it away or distract myself or tell myself I should be over it by now. That's when it became unbearable. That's when pain became suffering. The grief itself wasn't the problem. My relationship to the grief, my fighting with it, my resistance to it, that was creating the unbearable part. The moment I stopped fighting it, something shifted. The grief was still there, but I could breathe with it. I could be with it. It didn't have to destroy me. This is what I mean by stopping fighting your life. Not that you become passive. Not that you stop trying to improve things or make changes or pursue what matters. You still take action. You still make choices. You still work toward what you want. But you stop arguing with what is. You stop wishing the present moment was different than it is. You stop treating reality like an enemy that needs to be defeated. You work with what is, not against what is. I'm stuck in traffic. I can't change that right now. I'm in traffic. Fighting with it, getting frustrated, honking my horn, cursing other drivers. None of that changes the traffic. It just adds suffering on top of the difficulty. So I stop fighting it. Traffic is slow. That's what's true. I'll get there when I get there. Meanwhile, I can listen to music. I can be present. I can let this be a moment of my life, instead of a moment I'm trying to escape. My kid is having a meltdown. I can't change that right now. They're in the meltdown. Fighting with it, getting angry that they're not calm, demanding they control emotions they can't yet control. None of that helps. It just escalates. So I stop fighting it. They're having a meltdown. That's what's happening. I can stay calm. I can be present with them. I can let this be hard without making it worse through resistance. Someone I love is making choices I disagree with. I can't control their choices. Fighting with them, trying to force them to see it my way, resenting them for their autonomy, none of that helps. It just damages the relationship. So I stop fighting it. They're making their own choices. That's what's happening. I can share my perspective if appropriate. I can set boundaries if needed, but I can't control them. And trying to just create suffering for both of us. This doesn't mean you accept everything. It doesn't mean you don't work to change things that can be changed. It doesn't mean you become passive or resign. It means you stop arguing with reality while you're figuring out how to respond to reality. The traffic is slow. That's reality. You don't fight with that. You accept it. And then you decide, do I take a different route? Do I call ahead and say I'll be late? Do I just let myself be late and deal with the consequences? But you're making those choices from presence, not from resistance. From clarity, not from fight. Your kid is having a meltdown. That's reality. You don't fight with that. You accept it. And then you decide, do they need comfort? Do they need space? Do they need a boundary? What's the wise response here? But you're responding from groundedness, not from your own reactivity, from stability, not from fight. Someone you love is making choices you disagree with. That's reality. You don't fight with that. You accept it. And then you decide, do you speak up? Do you stay close? Do you create distance? What's aligned with your values here? But you're choosing from integrity, not from control. From love, not from fight. This is what it means to stop fighting your life. You see clearly what is. You allow it to be what it is. And then you respond from wisdom instead of reacting from resistance. Think about what you're fighting with right now in your life. What reality are you with? What circumstance are you resisting? What person are you trying to control? What feeling are you trying to eliminate? Notice how much energy goes into that fight. how exhausting it is, how much of your life force gets consumed by resistance. And then ask yourself, what if I just stopped fighting? Not forever, not as a permanent surrender, just for right now. What if you let this moment be exactly what it is? What if you stopped needing it to be different? What if you brought your full presence to what's actually here instead of putting all your energy into wishing it was something else? This is the practice that makes everything else possible. Because when you stop fighting your life, you finally have the energy and presence to actually live your life. You're not consumed by resistance anymore. You're not exhausted by the constant war with reality. You're not suffering on top of difficulty. You're just here, present, available, responding to what is instead of fighting with what is. This is freedom. Not the freedom to make everything perfect. Not the freedom to eliminate all difficulty. Not the freedom to control everything. The freedom to be with whatever comes without being destroyed by it. The freedom to see everything without reacting to everything. The freedom to live your actual life instead of the life you think you should be having. I'm still standing in my kitchen. The coffee is ready. The light has shifted slightly. My shoulders are still tight. The day is still ahead. Nothing has changed externally, but internally, everything is different because I'm not fighting anymore. I'm just here, present, available, ready to meet whatever comes. Not because I've transcended my humanity, not because I've achieved some permanent state of enlightenment, just because I've practiced consistently the simple act of seeing what is without immediately needing it to be different. And that practice has accumulated into this, a life I'm actually present for instead of constantly fighting against. This is what's possible for you. Starting now. Stop fighting. Start being. See everything. React to nothing. This is the practice. This is the path. This is the freedom you've been looking for. It was here all along, waiting for you to stop fighting long enough to notice. Closing. I'm standing in line at a coffee shop on a Thursday morning, and the woman in front of me is checking her phone. Her shoulders are relaxed. Her breath is steady. When the barista says her drink will take 3 minutes, she just nods and steps to the side. I don't know her story. I don't know if she's always been like this or if she's fought her way here through years of reactivity like I have. But I recognize something in her stillness. Not the stillness of suppression or disconnection. The stillness of someone who's here, present, seeing what's happening without needing to immediately respond to it. That's what this whole thing has been about. Not becoming someone who never feels triggered. Not achieving some permanent state of Zen calm. Not transcending your human nervous system. Just learning to see everything, all your thoughts, all your feelings, all your reactions, without being controlled by them. You are not your reactions. You never were. You're the awareness that notices your reactions. The space in which all your experiences arise and pass. The witness that remains steady while everything else moves and changes. And the more you practice accessing that witness, the more freedom you have. Freedom to choose your response instead of being hijacked by automatic patterns. Freedom to be present in your life instead of defending against it. Freedom to feel everything without being destroyed by anything. This is the practice. See everything, react to nothing. Not as a destination, as a direction. Some days you'll nail it. Some days you'll fail completely. Most days you'll be somewhere in the middle, catching yourself faster, recovering more quickly, choosing more consciously. And that's enough. That's everything, actually. Because every moment you choose to witness instead of react, you're rewiring your brain. You're creating new pathways. You're becoming someone different than who you were. Not all at once. Not permanently. But gradually, consistently, undeniably. The woman who was losing her mind in the coffee shop? She's still in there. She still shows up sometimes when I'm tired or stressed or triggered beyond my capacity to witness. But she's not running the show anymore. She's just one possibility, one pattern, one option I can choose. That's what I want for you. Not perfection, not immunity, just choice. The choice to see without immediately reacting, to feel without immediately responding, to be present with what is instead of constantly fighting against it. You already know everything you need to know. The practice is simple. 5 minutes a day of witnessing. Countless micro moments of catching yourself in reaction and choosing differently. The only question left is, will you do it? Will you commit to the practice even when it feels pointless? Will you keep returning to presence even after you've fallen back into reaction for the 100th time? Will you trust that the small, boring, consistent practice actually changes everything? Because it does. I'm living proof. And soon, so will you be. See everything. React to nothing. That's the practice. That's the path. That's the freedom you've been looking for. Start now.